So Terence Crawford captures another world title in another weight class, beating Israil Madrimov via 12-round unanimous decision. Now, I was picking Terence Crawford to win and by unanimous decision, although I thought he would win by a much bigger margin, something like 10-2, 9-3, very convincing, very clear unanimous decision. However, I didn't score the fight that way. I have to be honest. I just want to give a disclaimer though. I didn't watch this fight live. I did watch it this morning. That's when I caught up with the boxing. The copy of this fight that I was watching wasn't greatest. It was the quality wasn't great in terms of the resolution. You probably see sometimes when fights get uploaded to YouTube, they're zoomed in, so you can't always see the fighters in their entirety. So it can be difficult to pinpoint and see what's going on. Sometimes things are just off screen. And the last round was actually missing, so I had to look elsewhere and watch it in a different video. So far from ideal conditions. So I think I'm going to rewatch this one when I found a better copy. Go through it with a fine-tooth comb, reassess, see if there's any difference. But based on what I have seen this morning, I thought that this was a very close and very tight fight. To go through my scorecard, I had round one even. I found it very difficult. I actually rewatched that one. I watched that round twice. I had a difficult time splitting these two. Crawford, I gave him the second. The third, the fourth, I gave to Madrimov. 5 and 6 to Crawford. 7, 8 to Madrimov. 9 to Crawford. 10 to Madrimov. And then 11 and 12 to Crawford. So overall, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 rounds to Crawford. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds to Madrimov, and then 1 round even. So you can tell from that I had this fight very close. And I want to say that I was actually, if you want to talk about impressions, I was actually more impressed with Madrimov. And now I said before in my pre-fight video that I've never been overly impressed by him. I've always seen him as a good, solid fighter, but nothing spectacular. I know he has these crazy highlight reels where he's super athletic and he's really dynamic, but when I've watched him, I felt like there was some boxing nuance missing. I felt that he maybe relied a bit too much on his athleticism and wouldn't work enough, wouldn't box enough, and wouldn't always be in the flow that I feel he needed to be most effective. But in this fight, I got to give a lot of credit to Madrimov. I think he really stepped up to the mark and he was just firing on all cylinders. I think he really tightened up his defense, tightened up his boxing. And I've addressed this before, but there's this weird comparison that people have made for years between Madrimov and Golovkin, which I think is silly. I think it's bizarre. I don't see it other than some similarities in their build and their facial likeness. But if someone after watching this performance of Madrimov said that he had some similarities with Dmitry Bivol, I'd agree, because he was using that same kind of style with the in and out feet, moving his hands, really utilizing some effective hand placement, just being a real dynamic target, very difficult to pin down. And I think that threw Terence Crawford off for large stretches of the fight. Crawford didn't have the same sharpness that we've seen him have recently. And I know in his last fight against Errol Spence, Spence really is not at his best any longer based on that performance. But so he's only going to be able to put forth a certain amount of resistance. But if you just look, when I assess the way Terence Crawford performed against Spence, there was no delay, there was no latency in his movements. He looked super sharp, I thought Terence Crawford did. Whereas in this fight, I just think he was lacking that cutting edge. You know, there was a bit of latency, maybe the slightest bit of sluggishness, which I do think comes from the inactivity. You know, he's been out of the ring for over a year. However, I think that's only that's a smaller contributing factor. I do want to give credit where it's due, and I want to say that Israil Madrimov, I think he was harder to pin down than expected because he wasn't there to be hit, really. He was very good defensively, very good offensively as well. I think the more eye-catching offense came from him. And yeah, I can't help but come away from watching this fight with the impression that Madrimov was the more talented, the more effective fighter, the more impressive performance came from him. Although I do think when we're talking about winning rounds, I'd just give Crawford one more round, something like that. I think Crawford, when it counted, particularly in the later part, he was just able to make Madrimov slow down, particularly in the 11th and the 12th. I feel like Madrimov's movement really started to wane a bit, but I think he did a fantastic job in the other 10 rounds earlier in the fight of really maintaining that work rate. So fantastic conditioning in preparation for this fight. But I think Crawford, he invested a lot in the body. He did land some good body shots, very sharp body shots, and I think they did get to Madrimov. Although I think this fight showed that Crawford's not going to be the puncher at light middleweight that he was at welterweight, especially because he was able to land some very flush, very sharp punches, but they didn't really have a massive effect on Madrimov. The body shots, I feel, did catch up to him, but that was in rounds 11 and 12. And don't get me wrong, that can still be the difference, particularly in a close fight like this. But no, I think a lot of us are going to have to reassess our view of Terence Crawford if he's going to be going to these higher weight classes. Like off the back of this, yeah, I don't think he's going to be beating Canelo Alvarez. Before, I was like, you know what, I'd probably give him a decent chance of doing it if he's able to use his mobility, use his sharpness. But if this is anything to go by, nah, I'd be favouring Canelo Alvarez. So hold my hands up, my take isn't always correct. It's just my opinion based on what I see, but I'm definitely going to be reassessing Crawford should he be fighting at light middleweight and potentially beyond. But nevertheless, I still think he comes away with the victory against Madrimov, but as I said, much closer margins than I anticipated and than I predicted. And I do feel that Madrimov, I just came away being more impressed by him, to be fair. In terms of the fight itself, it was a bit of a chess match. It wasn't the most entertaining fight, in my opinion. I definitely had a better time watching Jarrell Miller versus Andy Ruiz, which I've done my video on, so make sure to check that out. Just wasn't the greatest fight. It was intriguing. It was interesting to see how both guys were going to figure out the work around the obstacles that the other was presenting, but yeah, not the most entertaining fight for my money, but nevertheless intriguing. And Terence Crawford wins. Don't know what's going to be next though. I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Is he going to go for Jamel Charlo? Is he going to go for Tim Tszyu, Virgil Ortiz? And I think all of those guys are going to be a tough ask for Terence Crawford, but we'll have to see who comes next. But nevertheless, Terence Crawford, WBA light middleweight champion, wins by unanimous decision, but in a close one, a very close one, where Madrimov, I think he maybe outshined Crawford a little bit despite losing. So I'm actually going to be quite interested to see what Madrimov does next, because if he can build off of this performance, which I suspect he may be able to, I think he's going to be in for some big wins in the future. So that's my take on this fight and the performances of both men. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you make of this? Do you agree with the decision? Did you think Madrimov won? Did you have it a draw? Leave it down below and I'll get back to you. But for now, thanks for listening and I'll catch you on the next video.